At the end of chapter 3, we had only made it up to 5 frames in our project builder. Now with chapter 3, if we look back at it, we only had our buttons set up and our design set up, and we had 2 pages, the home page and the Trex page. But we didn't have any animation, and that's really what Flash is all about. So this is kind of the project builder near the end of chapter 4, and as you can see, we have a lot more frames now. Now this will vary between the different types of animations that you have. I have up to 155 in my project. You might have up to 100, you might have up to 200. It just depends on how much you animate and how long those animations last. So let's see what's happening with this project. It's going to ask you to start animating the home page one element at a time. You don't want to animate them all at one time because then it's just too much chaos for people to see. So you kind of want to stagger when things come in. So the first thing to come in is the Ultimate Tours heading, and that should come from small to big and from completely transparent to completely opaque. And then we have another animation of the logo, and this is just a logo I found online, or you can redesign your own or use the one given to you in the book. And that was a motion preset. You can do whatever animation you want. You can use a motion preset, you can create the animations, you can do something more, let's say, more fancy than what the book asks you to do. And then we have the subheading animate in, and then the buttons do staggered animation, and we can see each animation happening one at a time. So this is the home page, and as you can see, my home page stops at the 125th frame. So this is where I moved my stop action. At the 130th frame, we have the Trex page. This has no animation. It's just on the 130th frame so that we have a little bit of space between the home page and the Trex page. And then beyond that, we have the Cruises page, which starts on 135. Again, yours might start at a different point. But on this Cruises page, it's not just a stagnant page like Trex. It actually has a ship animation, and again, that's a new picture that I downloaded. It has a little motion tween on a motion path for that ship. So let's talk about a few things. First of all, as you can see, you're going to have a lot of layers in this project, so make sure that you are giving each layer a unique name and try to keep it as organized as possible. As you can see with mine, I've used folders for each of the different pages, and if it's something like the logo or the main heading that's going to be on all the pages, they're outside of the folders because they're used across many different pages. Another thing is I've color-coded all the different outline colors for these. I'm not saying that you have to do that, but that's one thing you could do. But make sure you're also keeping your library organized, and you can do these with folders. And as you can see for this one, we have 3 movie clips, the logo, the main title, and the subheading. And turning things into movie clips means that you can do more complex animation with them. So let's talk about the 2 different animations or types of animations that you can do. The first is to do a movie clip animation, or they're all movie clip, but this one is where you kind of do the motion editor. So let's say for this subheading, and I like to sometimes put my animations on separate files so that I don't mess up my original file, and that way I can kind of simplify what I'm looking at. So each of these, this is a graphic symbol and this is a movie clip symbol, and I've turned this into a movie clip because I want to do more than just moving it per se. Now the ship, I'm just going to move, so that's why it's a graphic symbol. So for this one, once it's a movie clip, and it has to be a movie clip, now we can animate this. We'll go ahead and go to Insert, Motion Tween, and it's automatically going to add 24 frames and turn it blue. That way you know it's a motion tween. 24 frames because we have 24 frames per second, so it's going to last at least 1 second. And I can expand that out to 40 if I so choose. So now at this point, let's say I wanted this to fade in. I can do color effect, alpha, and say 0. And then by the end of that animation, so by the 40th frame, I can click on it again and choose 100. So in 40 frames, it's going to fade in. So as you can see, the background is not lasting. It only lasts for 1 frame. So I can hit F5 on my keyboard or go to Insert, timeline, and frame to extend it out so they last the same amount of time. The other animation is a motion path. They're both motion tweens, but this one's actually going to follow a path. So for this one, I can click on the ship and I'm going to move it off the stage. I'm going to do again insert motion tween, and I want this also to last for 40 frames. And I'll move it to the other side by the 40th frame. And now what you can do is you can arch it or arc it. And if I wanted to do a wave, then that's a little bit different. You have to choose the sub-selection tool, click on one of the endpoints, and then grab these Bezier handles. And every single time I do that. So that's why you should always lock your layer. So now I can click on that endpoint, grab the handle, and now I can make a curve. The problem is that's not natural motion, because normally if it was going up and then down, the boat bottom would follow that wave. So we need to do a motion path. If I click inside of this motion tween, go to properties and do orient to path, then it's going to try to orient it. Unfortunately, it looks a little bit wonky because you have to start it out in the proper position. So because this is going up, we need to transform this so that it's following that natural curve. And then all of these should look correct. Okay, so another thing is the motion tween, or the motion editor, sorry. For this, and I'll go ahead and lock the ship so we don't mess that one up. For this, let's say you want to not just fade it in, but you want to go from small to big, and you want to spin it. Then if we're at this point, we can click on it, and I'll go ahead and change the width. So we're going to make it really small, and by this point, I'll click it again. I want it to be much larger, so I can drag that out. So let's see what that animation looks like. So it's growing and it's fading in. I can also use a motion editor, and I can start messing with the rotation. So this is your playhead, and here's all your frames. And this is how you can view viewable frames, and then you have expanded graph size, and then regular graph size. So I can, right now it's just showing me 40 frames. So in here, I can say at this point I want it to be a certain amount of rotation. So let's just go ahead and do that. And by the end, the 40th frame, I want it to go back to 0. So what that's going to do, back in the timeline, is it's going to twirl it in and fade it in and make it bigger at the same time. So this is why, again, I have it in a separate file, because that allows me to kind of play with it and not mess up my original file. So another thing people always ask me is, how do I move things around in the timeline in order to prepare to add animation? So basically you're going to move things around. So obviously I'm going to have the main heading animate in, and maybe I want to give that 25 frames. Well, the logo is not going to come in until after the main heading. So I'll shift click to select all these and then drag them, click and drag them to the 25th frame, because I don't want the logo to start until then. And then for this background, let's say I know I'm going to have 120 frames for this animation. I can go ahead and hit F5, and that'll make sure that it stays for that entire amount of time. So with the subheading, I might have that not show up until the 45th frame, because you need time for the logo to animate. And then the home picture, let's say I want the home page to end right here. I can just expand that out in time with F5. And then for each of these buttons, I can come and try to stagger, I can come and try to stagger this animation. And I think I might be doing that backwards. I am doing it backwards, because Trek should go first, then Tours and Cruises, but you kind of get the point. So it's just a matter of moving it around, and then as you get things where you want them to go, you can come here, and that one's locked. You can lock everything else. And now you can animate this and extend it out so that it hits the 25th frame, and then animate the logo and use motion presets or whatever you want to do. So let's go ahead and see what's happening with this. So there's the animation, that's a motion preset again, and then each one of these animate in. But if I click Treks, all of a sudden it goes back to the start. Why does it do that? Well, because when we first made this in chapter 3, again, we only had 5 frames to work with. So when I set that Trex button all the way back here, well, wherever Trex is, back here, if I click on that button, and of course it's locked, if I click on the Trex button, on release, go to and play 5. So it was going to go to 5 when 5 was our Trex page. But now our Trex page is at frame 130. So I need to come back in here, choose Trex, and I need to change this to frame 30. No, 130. Okay. And same thing for the home. If the home works, let's go ahead and try that out again. The home should work, but let's see what happens when you do click home. It's jumping us all the way back to frame 1, and we might not want to watch this animation every single time. So this might be something where you're going to have to come into the home button, and that one is locked too. And this one, we might want to have it go to 125. Oops. I always try to do that in there. 125. And then it's going to jump back to the 125th frame. Now for the actual timeline here, you should only see stop action script or any action script indicated by the little A on the stop movie layer. So we want it to stop at the end of the home page, stop on the Trex page, and then we also want it to stop on the cruises page, but after our ship animates. So that's when I can come here and I can hit F7 on the keyboard or insert timeline blank keyframe, and then here I can go to global functions, timeline control, and stop. And the last part, make sure that cruises, global functions, timeline control, go to, and we're going to have it jump to whatever this frame is, and it's 135. So let's go ahead and go back here, cruises, and do 135. Now let's go ahead and test this movie out. So it animates in, and I should go ahead and click cruises, and that worked. And if I click home, that home button doesn't work because it's 2 separate home buttons. You can see the 2 keyframes. So I can right click, remove frame, and then I can just extend this one out with F5, and we know this button has the correct action script. So it's a lot of stuff for chapter 4, but now we're kind of getting somewhere in terms of animation.